Good evening, everyone. My name is Joshua Daranijo, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Thank you all for joining in today. We are here for the inaugural ceremony of a new initiative, the Alliance for Green, for Green Environments, a short or an acronym AGE. Before we get started, I would like to say thank you to everyone for joining in, and thank you so much for the publicity and support for the up to today and how we were able to spread the word that on such short notice for that, I mean, just within a couple of days, 3 or 4 days, and we were able to spread the word out. And I'm seeing it on different platforms, people letting people know that today's inaugural ceremony. It's quite notable. Thank you so much for your support and the publicity. It's good to see young people interested in progressive initiatives like this, and it's quite notable when you see people come together and say, let's make a difference in our world. On that note, before we get started, I would like to just take a moment to say thank you to the organizers of this initiative and this program, the founding members of the Alliance for Green Environment. And I would like to introduce, on that note, one of the founders, Tosin Ogulano, to give us an opening statement or the welcome address. Tosin, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm not sure if I'm being heard. Can you hear me, Joshua?
Yes, I can hear you well, Tosin.
Oh, very well. Yes, I'm Tosin Ogulano, and I'm so excited to have everyone on board this evening. Thank you to everyone for joining us for the inauguration of Alliance for Green Environment. I must say that this initiative is born out of a heart that yearns towards saying that we live in a clean and healthy environment, a sustainable, clean and healthy environment. And I'm very sure we are all witnesses to various environmental pollution that we suffer in our society today, not just in Nigeria, but globally. At the moment, yes, our focus is still in Nigeria, but as we expand, we look towards more territories, more jurisdictions as we go further. So this word is just to give an introduction, to welcome everyone to this event this evening. And I hope that we'll have a wonderful time going forward. I wouldn't want to take so much of our time, so we could just go straight into the business of the day. Thanks to everyone once again. So I'm just full of gratitude. All right, Joshua, I think that'll be all for now from my end. So let's just move on into the main event, so we don't waste so much time on the introduction.
Well, that's perfect. Thank you so much for that welcome address, Tosin. We really appreciate, this initiative. The idea behind the initiative is very notable. That it's important for us to not just be professionals in our different fields, but understand the impact of our professions and our livelihood on our environment. That being said, we will move on to the keynote speaker. The keynote speaker for today's event is no other than the thought leader himself, Professor Damilola Olawiyi, SAN, and a fellow of the Institute of Arbitrators. I would like to just take a moment and read through his profile before we have him speak to each and every one of us. So Professor Damilola Sunday Olawiyi, SAN, and a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, is an international lawyer, professor of law, arbitrator, author, and policy consultant with expertise in petroleum, energy, and environmental law. In 2015, he became a professor of law at the age of 32, making him one of the youngest professors of law in Nigerian history. He is the director of the Institute for Oil, Gas, Energy, Environment, and Sustainable Development, or for short, OG's Institute of Afebola University, Nigeria, and also the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the university. He is also a professor of petroleum, energy, and environmental law, and Associate Dean of Research at Hamad bin Khalifa University Law School, Doha, Qatar. where he teaches energy and environmental law courses. Professor Olaoyi has been admitted to the bar in Alberta, Canada, Ontario, Canada, and in Nigeria. His areas of expertise cut across areas of global sustainability, specifically natural resources, energy, and environment. This is really an impressive profile. He has published extensively on oil and gas law, climate change, and intersections of human rights and environment. He has provided expert advice and opinion on seabed mining, electrical power plant projects, carbon emission reduction, credit trading projects, including carbon capture and sequestration, energy efficiency, and agricultural offset projects. He teaches courses on environmental law. It's good to note that he was one of my environmental law and oil and gas teachers back in my undergraduate days. He also teaches on climate change law, energy regulation, oil and gas law, and international human rights law. Professor Olaoyi has published close to 100 articles. Sorry, please, let's ensure to always stay muted while the moderator or any of the speakers are speaking. Thank you very much. I'll continue on this note. Professor Olaoyi has published close to 100 articles, book chapters, and books on environmental law, energy, and international environmental law. In recognition of his sustainable contributions to the legal scholarship and jurisprudence, Professor Olaoyi was awarded the rank of SAN, also the equivalent of the Queen's Counsel in the UK, in the year 2020, at the age of 37, becoming the youngest academic ever elevated to the rank of SAN, and the very first graduate of a private university to become SAN of Nigeria. Wow. Professor Olaoyi holds a doctorate degree in energy and environmental law from the University of Oxford, UK, a Master's of Law LLM degree from Harvard, another LLM from University of Calgary, Canada, and a diploma in international environmental law from the UN Institute for Training and Research at Geneva in Switzerland. He received his bachelor's degree LLB from Ibn University, graduating with a first-class honor, and also graduated from the Nigerian Law School. He serves on the executive committees and boards of several organizations. He's the vice chair of the International Law Organization and a co-chair of the African Interest Group of the American Society of International Law between the years 2016 and 2019. He's a member of the Academic Advisory Group of the International Bar Association's section on energy, environment, natural resources, and infrastructural law. He's also the editor-in-chief of the Journal of the Sustainable Development Law and Policy. On that note, I would like to hand over to our thought leader and keynote speaker for today. Good evening, Professor Olaoyi. If it was a physical gathering by now, we would have been all applauding, but we don't want to make everyone confused and you don't want the sound to be too distracting. But you deserve a standing ovation at this point. We just stand up and we honor you for your very much, numerous achievements, your plethora of achievements at such, which is very important to note, a very young age. I mean, youngest this, youngest that. Thank you so much, Ebuka. So a virtual round of applause will be appreciated by everyone listening. So you have the floor, Professor. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation.
Thank you very much, Joshua. Thank you for those kind and wonderful remarks. I'm blushing myself, so thank you so much. The founders and conveners of the Alliance for Green Environment, AGE, who are my former students at the great Afeola University, Oluwatosin Ogunlana and Daniel Delio. And of course, the panelists and speakers, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols duly and respectfully observed. I consider it a great honor to have been invited to chairman and keynote speaker today, which is the formal inauguration of the Alliance for Green Environment. I think all noble and self-respecting environmentalists, such as self, would have reasons to rejoice and celebrate, and of course, be very proud of this initiative. The world is looking for innovation. And so what AGE is doing is innovative. And of course, I'm particularly proud of the fact that the initiative is spearheaded by two of my own former students, industrious graduates of the great Abwad. I'm excited also that the moderator of today, Joshua Daranijo, is another worthy alumnus of our university. I think it confirms the status of Abwad wherever you turn your eye, whether in law practice, industries, banking, environmental advocacy. An Abwad graduate is always at the top, spearheading socioeconomic reform, spearheading societal rebirth, spearheading economic growth, spearheading sustainable development. That is the Abwad spirit. That is the spirit of the founder of Afe Babalola University. So I did not expect anything less. I'm only proud, and I will continue to be proud of your accomplishments. I think today's event is particularly timely, considering the current challenges facing our world due to the pandemic. The pandemic has taught all of us that until we straighten our relationship with the natural environment, nature will be angry with us. As you might have seen or read in the news, the pandemic can be directly traceable or traced to the unholy relationship, I would say, between humankind and nature. And you see that due to that lack of respect for nature, there's been a rise in zoonotic diseases, which is diseases transferred from animals. The pandemic, COVID-19, and we've had the likes of MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, MERS, avian flu, Ebola virus disease, and the likes. These are all zoonotic diseases, and they are timely reminders that we perhaps need to respect nature more and straighten our relationship with nature. So like never before, there's an increasing realization that mankind may not be able to live life to the fullest if we fail to sustainably manage and address environmental impacts associated with development and growth in key sectors. So, and one key area that the world is still struggling with is the area of managing the production and disposal of waste. This is indeed one of the most significant sustainability challenges facing our current world, including Nigeria. Our country, Nigeria, currently faces a waste emergency, which, if not sustainably addressed, could result in significant health impacts, spread of diseases, disruption of aesthetics and landscape, whatever of it we have left, and increased toxic disposal challenges. Waste accumulation rate in Nigeria is currently surprising, and we do not have the necessary facilities to cope with that waste generation and accumulation level. Nigeria currently generates an estimated 32 million tons of solid waste a year, which is one of the largest in the continent of Africa. Less than 20% of that volume is properly collected, treated, or disposed. What we do in Nigeria, as you all know, is to simply burn waste in landfills. You put some kerosene or whatever you've got, and you set it on fire, which is burning of waste, which by itself is an economic and environmental monstrosity. And I call it that because the whole world is talking about developing a circular economy. And what we've got in our country is that we do not have the facilities, the technologies, and the technical capability, I must say, to think of how else to manage and dispose of our increasing volume of waste. This waste accumulation is traceable to population growth. Nigeria has grown over the last years from a country of just under 100 million to a country of over 300 million citizens, and we're still counting. We've seen a change in household consumption patterns. We've seen increased production and use of plastics. We've seen increased use of toxic materials in construction and manufacturing sectors. We've also seen factors such as just lack of infrastructure to collect and manage waste. Whereas when you travel and you go to some countries, you see them neatly demarcating between a green bin and a blue bin and a white bin. Most times the blue bin is for things you don't need and you want to discard, and the green bin is for recyclables. And at times the white bin can be for, some countries use that for batteries and the likes, electronic waste that you want to be safely disposed. But wherever I go in Nigeria, I look for those bins and I cannot find them.
Professor, sorry to cut you short, sir. I just took note of the fact that you seem to be presenting, or you have a presentation. Would you like to share it, or you prefer it this way?
Well, you know, it's a speech, so I don't have any PowerPoint. I'm just talking.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry for that interruption.
That's fine. No problem. So, like I was saying, so you know, wherever you go, my career has taken me to different parts of the world, as Joshua mentioned, and I noticed that I found those bins in many of those countries. But you know, whenever I'm back home and I'm looking for those bins, I realized the futility of my search because I just cannot find them anywhere. And that shows you how far we are in terms of understanding waste management and properly managing our increasingly accumulated waste products. Well, if we are to address the social, health, environment, and economic impact of waste, Nigeria must wake up to the reality, the compelling realities of our time, and increasingly follow some of the doctrines of waste management that are being propounded or propagated rather by the United Nations and other bodies. I've mentioned the rise of the concept of a circular economy. And a circular economy is an important concept because the concept that talks about the fact that there should be no waste in the first place. What we call waste can actually be reprocessed, repurposed, and used for other things. So if you really want to transition to a circular economy in any country, then you find out that there's actually nothing called waste, because you then, as you're generating it, you're recycling it, you're turning it to something else, and it just keeps going. And that's why we call it circular, because just think of anything, whether it's, let's say, you know, the waste is supposed to be a piece of paper. You finish using it, you recycle it from that, it turns to another piece of paper. And so it's circular, there's really no waste. And that's what international law is increasingly propagating. So the circular economic concept is something that we are yet to understand in Nigeria. And it is a concept that focuses on the four hierarchy of waste management. If you want to implement a circular economy concept or the circular economic concept in any country, then you're going to be implementing the 4 R's, which is reduce, reuse, recycle, and recover. Reduce meaning, why don't you reduce the waste accumulation in the first place? Why don't you, and you can reduce your waste accumulation by trying to use items that are not that are recyclable, rather than using plastic bottles for water, for example. Countries that are trying to practice reduce are using bottles that you don't need to buy a plastic bottle, but you can use your own water bottle for water, rather than buying plastic bottles and throwing them. So reducing waste, reusing, recycling, and recovering. And so the idea of minimizing waste will be the first thing we have to integrate into our mindset in the country. Then we move to reuse, which is converting waste items from, for other secondary uses, such as cleaning, refurbishing, or reconditioning them for further use. And then we have on the waste hierarchy, the idea of recycling, like I mentioned, which is reprocessing and converting for beneficial use, something that ought to have been discarded. And the last is recovery, which is the conversion of waste products to manufacture a new and cost-effective one. So rather than throwing away that tire from a car, you could actually use it to create something beautiful. And so this whole concept of waste to energy taps into this idea of the 4 Rs of a circular economy. And I like the fact that Age is beginning its endeavor by this idea of waste to energy, because like I said, it's part of a circular economic concept. And as you may know, or as you may wish to know, the whole world now is facing a challenge of energy security, trying to say, how do we generate energy in a cleaner manner? The concept of energy security, as you know, talks about the 3 A's of affordability, accessibility, and availability. So how do we have energy that is available, affordable, accessible, and still clean? And so you see the whole world trying to transition away from oil and gas to cleaner energy sources. And some of us that started our careers as oil and gas lawyer are quickly rebranding ourselves as energy lawyers, because we can see that you know, the future for that our beloved oil and gas sector is quite bleak these days. So what we are then seeing is that you know, countries are beginning to transition away from the addiction to oil and gas. And for anyone to remain relevant in that transition, you have to then think of new forms of energy. And one of those important forms of energy that the world is embracing lately is conversion of waste from biomass to gas. So seeing countries, oil and gas countries, now beginning to rebrand themselves as synthetic gas countries. And what do I mean by synthetic gas? Synthetic gas is gas that is generated from biomass. And what do I mean by biomass? It means waste. It means maybe food, wood, plastics, and those things that you normally abandon. And rather than just throwing them or burning them, science has shown us that you can actually reprocess them and you can generate synthetic gas. And there is a boom in the manufacture and production of synthetic gas. China is taking a lead, and a number of countries are keening into this idea of synthetic gas. And we are beginning to fear that in the next few years, there might even be a cartel like OPEC, which will be be an association of manufacturers of synthetic gas. That is what the world is talking about now: conversion of waste to synthetic gas. Rather than burning them, rather than throwing them away, rather than discarding them, why don't we then begin? And given that Nigeria is rich in everything, we are rich, just as we were rich in oil, or we are rich in oil and gas, we're also rich in waste. And since we are rich in waste, we can also be one of the leaders of synthetic gas. We can convert that our waste to gas. We can convert our waste to cash. A number of countries are, incentivizing waste collection. You bring your waste to a depot, we give you some money. And so that is a way of encouraging people to change their lifestyles and use, bring their waste to a designated point. The government takes it, collects it, gives you cash as a reward for your effort, and then the government converts that waste to synthetic gas. These are all new ideas. These are all innovative ideas. But for a country to implement them, of course, we must be ready to embark upon innovative ideas that will allow for energy citizenship, that will allow young ones, innovative minds, not the tired minds, but innovative minds that will actually set up such entities. I told, I'm sure Tosin and the likes would have heard this story before. I normally tell them that the world is moving away from an era of just paper certificates in which you just have a certificate, you're looking for a job and all of that. Actually, the world is rewarding innovators more. The future belongs to innovators. The future belongs to energy citizens, those that can sit down, conceptualize the needs of their countries and meet those needs. It was a former president of the United States that said that he no longer thinks of what his country can do for him, but what he can do for the country. And I challenge youths, and I challenge energy scholars, energy students, aspiring scholars, to think of what they can do for their countries, including our country, Nigeria. Think of how you can help Nigeria to generate, to leverage its richness in waste to become wealth. Rather than Nigeria being ranked as one of the, as having some of the dirtiest cities on earth, we can actually convert that waste to become money. Rather than us waiting for government, we know that if you are waiting for government in Nigeria to do anything for you, you will wait very well and very long. Because like I say, in our country, when you say I cannot think of what the government can do for me, but what I will do, it is because you should not even think of what government can do for you, because the answer is very clear. It's nothing. So I always say that if we want to be forward-looking, then we should tap into some of these innovative ideas. And I've written extensively about energy citizenship, which is the idea of becoming suppliers of energy yourself. Anyone can become an energy supplier.
Professor,
it doesn't have.
Sorry to cut you short, but we have to have it start rounding up, sir.
Yes. We're
Yes,
getting
sir.
there. So,
Okay, sir.
I think it's very, very important to start thinking of this idea of energy citizenship and getting young minds to think of. And I'll wrap up with this story of when I was studying at Harvard. One of my very, and I recall that I was able to take courses at MIT. So I met a very young lady who a Nigerian as well. She was studying at MIT, but we had common courses. And she turned while I was writing my LLM thesis, she turned her own master's thesis to a project. And today she has won several awards. You must have heard of Recyclers in Lagos, that is doing a lot of fantastic things, just picking up waste and converting them to cash. So I want to encourage you on a final note to think of such innovative ideas. I am willing to support such ideas, such as the one we're launching today. I can tell you with all the emphasis at my disposal that I will be here every step of the way to help you in every way possible. If I can be of assistance, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. Ladies and gentlemen, those are my remarks. I wish you the very best as you discuss these important concepts. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, sir. As I said earlier, we would appreciate virtual round of applause to keep things orderly. Thank you so much, Professor. I just want to take note of the fact that you mentioned recyclers, because when you mentioned waste for money, they are the only people that come to mind, and I'm one of their volunteers. I didn't even know you had a relationship with her or you knew her before. She's actually doing a wonderful job. And it's important that we replicate what she's doing on a larger scale. I don't know if you have any questions. So if you have any questions for Professor, because this is a session, just kindly have it typed out in the chat room so I could ask him the questions. That would really be much appreciated. We have about 3 minutes for that. I would also like to take note of the fact, while we wait for any questions, that he mentioned single use, because if it was left to me, I would have thought Professor would have, mentioned how, these are the things that he thinks government have been recommended to government. But Professor already made it very clear that, if we say you're waiting around for governments to implement these things, we're not going to make progress. It might take a while. So you personally have to take up the task of, playing an impactful role. And the little things are single use. I know most people might find this weird, but for most of my NYSC year, I tried my best, my very best, to use just my maybe water bottle, or just use one single bottle that I could always pour water into from the dispenser, or water from home. Avoid using single-use plastic PET bottles and all that. I also tried it one occasion, because it was quite embarrassing, so I had to stop. I didn't feel comfortable with it. I was still very shy back then. I entered the restaurant and I wasn't willing to eat there, and I came with my pack, just like I was in university or something. And I was like, please, can you serve it into my pack? And they're like, okay, we have our own packs. I'm like, thank you, but I want to use my pack. I don't want to take your plastic pack. And it just felt a bit weird. I felt embarrassed, but I did that. And that was just my own single way. I remember handing over my plastic waste from June 2019 to the middle of the pandemic in June 2020, a year's worth of waste. Recyclers came over to my house. So they pick it up, they come and pick up the plastics. They picked up 7.1 kg of plastic bottles used over a 12-month period. So you can imagine that these things most times end up in the Echo Bridge, the waters over the Echo or the Third Mainland Bridge. You see how bottles are, floating over the waters. You can just reduce those amount of bottles by the ones you use. hand it over to responsible recyclers, and you play your own impact. Avoid single-use plastics. Instead of plastic bags or nylons as we know them as, use a tote bag to go to the shopping mall. Use maybe a bag that you can reuse. All these things are your little way of avoiding and reducing the impact you make on the society. I still take note of the fact that there are no questions for Professor, and at this note, we'd just like to say thank you so much for your keynotes. We really appreciate you and for making our time to be a part of this. Okay, someone just asked the question, and this will be the only question. Professor, someone said, what do you mean by being energy citizenship? Did you ever make mention of energy citizenship?
Yes, I did.
Yes.
Energy citizenship is a concept that is fast developing, and I just released a publication on that. And it is this whole idea that the future of energy is moving away from waiting on centralization of energy, in which there's a generation of energy and then it's distributed and then you pay for it, and then the world is moving away from that centralization to a decentralized source. And by decentralized, we mean in which citizens themselves use their own energy, the energy they use, and can even sell energy to others. And you see in the United Kingdom, for example, they have the Localism Act, which has just been enacted, in which they are actually encouraging citizens to produce energy and sell and make money. And when we say produce energy, we're talking of things like solar, or things like generating forms of energy from biofuels and the likes, and the sort of things we're talking about today. That is energy citizenship, the active involvement of citizens themselves in the generation of energy and in the sale and commercialization of energy. That is energy citizenship. We are still not there in Nigeria, but that is the future of energy law and policy.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you for that clarification. I hope that person was satisfied. The only other question here seems like a rhetorical question, so I'll just say it for the sake of rhetoricism. It says, what is the reality of single use in a country that is still with high poverty rates? Because something like pure water might never go out of, it might never be extinct, because pure waters are the most affordable. So I think it's a rhetorical question. It comes down to we being able to find ways individually. For example, instead of buying a pure water, why don't you maybe have a bottle that you use as your own, and you squeeze the pure water bottle, you squeeze the water of the pure water into, and maybe you give it back to the person that you bought it from to keep into. I mean, it's just a way where you try your best to make sure you are not littering, or you find a designated, what do we call that now? A trash can, because most times pure water ends up on the side of the road. So it just that intentionality on our part. If you know you are using pure water, try your best to always, I always put trash in my bag until I find a trash can. It takes discipline. I put it in my own bag until I find a trash can, instead of making it a habit to just throw it on the side of the road. We can't take any more questions. Okay.
And let me just quickly add to that, if I can, please. I think the worst form of poverty in Nigeria is not the economic one; it's the poverty of the mind. And until when we dismantle the poverty of the mind, the country may not make any progress. And why do I say this? The reason why they don't drink pure water in the United Kingdom is because it's not even available in the first place.
True.
So we need to think of the fact that government has a role in creating sustainable jobs for people so that they don't have to hawk pure water. And citizens themselves have a role in saying we need to make. Nigeria is the only country, well, maybe some other poorer African countries, but Nigeria is one of the very few countries whereby you find pure water on the street in the first place. So we need to conquer the poverty of our minds so that we can conquer economic poverty in this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That kind of concludes things. It's the mindset that needs to change. Thank you so much, Professor Olawi. We appreciate you for your time. Moving on to the next speaker for
Hi, Joshua, you're muted.
So your mic is off.
Oh, I am so sorry. Thank you so much for that. I was just trying to say that this thing of being an environmentalist has nothing to do with your profession as a banker or a lawyer. It is something that concerns each and every one of us. Thank you so much for the feedback, guys. So moving on to the next speaker, let me just take a moment and read his profile. Dr. Kelechi Justin Okere. Dr. Kelechi Justin Okere is an environmentalist, a climate change scientist, a waste management and safety expert with a PhD in natural resources and environmental management from the University of Port Harcourt, Nigeria. He has over 15 years of varied experience in research, teaching, oil and gas, and waste management organization, especially around environmental engineering planning, implementation, and management, with cost-saving running in several millions of dollars. Dr. Okere has powered cost-effective and sustainable awareness in waste management, pollution control, sustainability studies, and greenhouse gas emission reduction. Dr. Okere graduated with a distinction in his PhD and was considered for adjunct appointment to teach master students at the Institute of Natural Resources, Environment, and Sustainable Development at the University of Port Harcourt. He has many years of industrial experience including holding the position of a senior quality safety, security, health, and environment advisor at Pascal Technical Services Limited, Port Harcourt. He is certified by the National Examination Board in Occupational Safety and Health, UK, and as a safety and health practitioner. As a safety and health practitioner. He also has certifications from top-class institutions like Harvard, Stanford, MIT, and Columbia. Amazing. Dr. Okere continually avails himself to be a part of any sustainable research and operation with a view of enhancing integrity in learning and operations of global standard. He is determined to enable safe environments which not only aids sustainable operations that create market and prosperity, but as well support the achievement of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals with a reduction in global climate impact. Dr. Okere has attended both international and local conferences and has several reputable publications and is presently the head of the Department of Chemical Sciences at Ezekiah University, Imo State, and the managing consultant of a waste management company, Stinos Energy Services Limited, Port Harcourt. Is married with 2 children. Please join me in giving a virtual applause to our second speaker, Dr. Kelechi Okere. Is Doctor with us? Because I saw him earlier, a moment ago. Hello?
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening, sir. Great to have you.
Yeah,
Thank you for honoring our invitation.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here. I must commend you people for this opportunity to speak. First of all, I want to thank Professor Olawuyi. Honestly, I never knew he's this young. I'm quite impressed with his CV. I'm quite impressed with what he has achieved. And I'm also quite impressed with the age for this sustainable strategy, what you're doing. I can tell you and I can assure you that what you're doing is quite impressive. And like Professor said, it's quite time. We know where we are right now. In fact, for me, what I say is we're actually on a very dangerous trajectory. The environment right now, I say we are actually on environmental thalidomide. Issues are quite huge, so a thing like this is quite important, is good, so that we try to take care of our environment. We talk about sustainable development. That's what we do today to ensure that the future generation will also get what we're getting today. What you're doing is sustainable. I will lend my support in any way I can to ensure this continues to be. Thank you. so much. I also appreciate the fact that you've given me this to talk about. Excuse me, okay. Waste management in Nigeria, issues and recommendation. Are we here? Okay, I think I will need to share. I will need to try to share this.
Yes, we are with you, sir.
Yeah.
You can. I think you have the right to share.
Yes.
You can go ahead and share your screen, sir.
Okay, so let me get it on. Can you see it? Are you able to see?
I don't think you're sharing yet, sir. Make another. No, sir. You're not sharing yet. I don't think you're sharing yet. It hasn't loaded any.
Okay.
So make another attempt to try and share, sir.
Hold on.
Okay, it's loading. You're sharing your screen as of now. I can see your screen. If you can see the screen, please just make a comment.
Okay.
You can go ahead and start, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Everybody can see it right now? Okay, good. Thank you for the opportunity to share my experience with you on waste management in Nigeria, issues and recommendation. Waste is a problem, and that's why what we have today is quite important. Right around the world, the waste is actually, the generation is quite huge, almost 10 billion tons according to UNEP in 2015, and out of which close to 20% is about municipal solid waste. And I remember during my master's, one of my professors, Professor Gomutu, a professor of solid waste management, told us that the earth is actually owing about 30%. That means the earth is carrying 130%. So right now we hear that we require one more earth to absorb the waste we're generating. Of course, you and I know the implication of some of this. In Nigeria, we generate about 90,000 tons per day, and just about 20 to 30% is collected. This is quite tremendous. And we all know the diameter of the Earth, which is close to 13,000 kilometers. There's a research that says that if you use the waste, can you hear me?
Please, let's ensure to stay muted while the speaker is speaking. We cannot hear you, sir. It was a short interruption. Please stay muted. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. The waste trucks could go the earth round more than once. You know what it means? So we actually engrossed and enclaved with the waste. That's quite huge. And the waste sector, we hear it contributes about 20% of the global human base methane, which is much, and it actually continues to increase. It's going to continue to increase as long as the population, just like a professor said, population is an issue. Even the GDP, as the GDP grows, definitely the waste will continue to grow. This is quite striking. In fact, I saw this, it was when I was doing my PhD, and I got so worried. We're talking about 50 biggest dump sites in the world. Wow. 6 in Nigeria, 6 out of 50. That's about 12%. That's the biggest. It's quite huge. And actually, one of the biggest dump sites in the world is actually domiciled here, also in Nigeria. That's this dump site. Is about, is actually located somewhere at Ojota, is on a land of about 100 acres, and which actually has received over 50% of all waste coming from Lagos. And some of the waste, a lot of electronic waste actually come from there. Then, because of the treatment, in fact, a new research recently published says that within 2 kilometers, the place is actually quite polluted with heavy metal. I mean, the groundwater. So these are some of the towns in Nigeria and what they're actually generating. You can see that Lagos is actually generating much more than every other town. And these are some of the states also. That's a research done by Bati 2020, showing the emissions from some of these states. Actually, I think because we have a unique problem as regards waste management in Nigeria. What happens in anywhere is actually what happens in Imo State is what happens in River State is what happens in Kano is same. So I'm just thinking I could just use Imo State as a case study because I've actually done some work here. This is my work. Actually part of my PhD, and I've actually published some works from here. So I'm taking about 3 local governments from Imo State, the key metropolitan areas. Is about 3 local governments, West, and Owerri North. Okay, Owerri is actually the administrative capital of Imo State, and the population is about is actually much more than this. This is actually according to NPC. But if you check the data we're going to be rolling out, actually we have actually worked out the population increase based on the projections by World Bank. I think it's about 2.4%. So this is basically what we do here in Nigeria, even though we are using Imo State here. What do? We just collect the waste. They actually commingled waste. Everything is put together. There's no source of waste separation. Everything goes to the landfill. What you see here, down here, you can look at this open channel, clogged with waste. And of course, you could know the implication of this. The floodings, most of the floodings that happen today, they're actually due to the poor waste management. And what you see here is a market, is one of the biggest markets, where, what you see here is waste burning. And people, around there, you see a lot of people. So you can imagine the health impact of some of these things, especially with the, high frequency. So then look at this. In fact, the picture A, what you're seeing there is just opposite another market at Irete. There's a place called Irete. It's actually at Owerri North. And we actually took some samples of those, the niche. We know what the niche does, what all those liquid coming out from the west. You can see behind you seeing that's the residential building. And definitely you will know that residential building, they're going to have something like a borehole. And most of these niche, they go into the ground. And of course, most of the areas around here, they're actually polluted. And B here, this is an illegal abattoir. Most of the waste coming from the killings of all those animals, they put right into the water. What you have there is a river. That's the Uwore River joining the Otamre River. So you can imagine the bioload on this water. In fact, we actually found out that we couldn't see fishes around here, even close to maybe about 400 meters from there, we could not see fishes. Of course, you and I know the implication of this. So behind here, I took this picture. If you look back, you're going to see people swimming. That is actually a recovered landfill. What you're seeing there, you can see that tall building behind. That's an old landfill at Naze, and you can see people swimming there. Of course, I'm not going to take my camera straight and picture them. The implication of what will happen. So, and we have actually tested this water. They actually polluted. We have actually done a risk assessment on this water and the soil here. Honestly, I don't know what could be happening to some of these people around here. Actually, this place is quite polluted. And here that's the earth picture here shows the landfill at Nekede. This landfill is about 100 meters, less than 100 meters to the water here. So you and I know the implication of this is quite terrible. And you see, most of the dump sites in Nigeria are actually located very close to the river. I don't know why it's always like that, you see. And a lot of researchers have shown that most of those waters have actually gone polluted based on the leachate coming out from some of this waste. So this is still that recovered dump site. What you can see here is which is actually as a result of the bioload coming up from some of those waste coming from the abattoir. And what you see here is plastic in the river. In fact, there's a research by MacArthur Foundation, a very recent one, that says that if business as usual continues, that we may have more number of plastics in the river than we have the number of fishes by 2050. And we can actually, it may even happen even before then, because the kind of plastics that actually discharge into the river, they're actually quite tremendous. So what we have here is a map of Imo State showing where we have all those waste points. And if you look, you see that most of the concentrations are actually around this Owerri Municipal, which is actually where the governor, most of the establishments are. And you can see that, most of the other local governments are actually not covered. So what happens to even the waste coming from there? You and I could actually imagine that. So, of course, this is a hierarchy overseas. And what we have here, these are the dump sites we have in Imo State. We have about four of them, 4 dump sites in Imo State. None is engineered. Just dump. Just take the waste and dump. And all of them actually very close to rivers. All the rivers are actually polluted. The rivers are actually contaminated. So we have actually done some field work. And look at here, you see 2003, we are talking about degradation right now. 2003 here, you can see here, what we have here, we have some level of vegetation, and close here is the river. This is Otamiri River here, Otamiri River. Then they started to put on waste here. Of course, we know the importance of our plants. They help to sequester carbon. They help, of course, through photosynthesis, they also help to keep the environment fine. Okay, now 2014, can you see anything here? Nothing is here. The vegetations are gone. And look at here, 2017. This river is less than 200 meters from here. And most of they do a lot of dredgings here. So we cannot even ascertain the integrity of all the sand. Every day we talk about collapse of building here and there. We don't know. Some of these things, they could have a relationship. It's quite possible. Then here is actually telling us about the generations in Imo State and possible externalities. Of course, we know that externalities can be positive or it can be negative. So in Imo State, they generate about 650 to 1,000 tons. We actually went to the field, but here, these figures are actually based on what we have in the landfill. Now, everything goes to the landfill. Everything, all these 650, 1,000 go to the landfill. Of course, to tell you, this arrow tells you, what happens to some of the waste. Because we have actually initially said that about 20 to 30% are what we collect. Then where do the rest go? Some of them go into our waste drains, some of them are bonds, and of course, some other things. So all goes to the landfill. These are the implications of what happens in the landfill. Everything going to the landfill. We see we generate about 72,000 μ³ of methane, which is quite much. And right in the landfill there, the dump site, not landfill, the dump site, of course, they also do some burning. The implication is also that we're able to release this much of carbon dioxide, and the leachate we generate from this dump site, which are not collected, they go in anywhere, go into the rivers, seep down right into the underground waters and they get polluted. In fact, honestly, we need to do something. That is why something like this is important. We need to do something. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what will be happening in the next 10 years or 20 years. We need to do something because if things continue the way they are, we may not have potable water by then. So we need to do something. And of course, the implication of some of these things, we have pollution of air, water, and soil. We've done a lot of work on some of these things, and it's quite horrifying. But there is a leeway. We can go into waste to energy. And that is why your topic, roadmap to waste energy is quite commendable. And we can actually align it with CDM, which is Clean Development Mechanism. So these are some of the data we have from the fieldwork. And of course, somebody may be saying, where is the hazardous waste 16%? I've actually listed here what we consider as hazardous. We know that some of the features of hazardous material is that it's toxic, it's flammable, it could be corrosive, and more. So we have done a conceptual site modeling of the waste situation in Imo State. And of course, we consider the common places they drop the waste. Government provided some places. Some of them are not actually provided by the government. People just drop. And we've considered that, and also considered, that's we call them the transfer points actually, and also consider the dump site. And of course, the implication of some of these things are actually the ecological receptors and exposure routes. That's what we have here. We have done a risk assessment, looking at the impact of some of these things to our aquatic ecosystem, as well as us, the humans, and it's quite terrible. Of course, the roots, some of these things could be ingested. Of course, they could pass. You saw people swimming. They could actually be passed through dermal contact or even inhalation, especially the air pollutants. So it's quite huge. These are some of the equivalences of the carbon emission from Imo State. We can see here, we have that the greenhouse gas emission equivalent of what we do in Imo State is about passenger vehicles driven for 1 year and all this. And the carbon emission from, you can see, gallons, that's 31 million gallons of gasoline consumed. And carbon sequestered by 261,000 acres of US forests. This is equivalent to more than 150% the size of Singapore. That's quite huge. So by the time you bring in all the states in the federation, because they practice the same type of waste management, you can tell us, what could happen. So now we talked about CDM. CDM is actually part of the flexible mechanism. Started during the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol. We also have joint implementation, but our interest here is CDM because Nigeria is a developing nation. CDM could be done between the global north, which is the developed countries, and the global south, that's the developed countries. What do we do? Because of the stringent environmental laws in most of those countries out there, what do? They may not be able to meet up their emission commitments. So what they do is that they can come to a country like Nigeria that is of Annex B to put up a project. So what that project is actually to ensure that some level of emission, which we call certified emission reduction, is gained. So whatever that is gotten from that project in terms of reduction of carbon or greenhouse gas is actually now transferred to them for them to meet up their targets. So here we have actually modeled Imo State, using CDM, and we've actually seen that it's actually profitable. In fact, we could, at this 0.22 per certified emission reduction unit, Imo State could be making about $60,000, $60,000 to $90,000, and in a period of 10 years, they could make over $600,000. So it's quite good. Another thing you can see, we are going to have a healthier society. We're going to have the climate impact is actually going to reduce drastically with this, because we are diverting west. We're diverting west. Right now, west is not a cost. So we also will be reducing the pollution, the air pollution, water pollution, soil pollution, and also improve our ecosystem services. So this is actually the procedure that you can pass through for you to earn your carbon credit. This is what we have in Nigeria for now. For me, we know that some of this is actually on paper, but implementation is a problem. So this is a comparison between Nigeria and Europe. You can see that we are nowhere. Of course, okay. So we have actually also done, we considered, of course, there are several ways we could convert our energy, convert our waste, but we've considered two: anaerobic digestion and incineration. So for here is anaerobic digestion. Anaerobic digestion, of course, when you hear anaerobic, that without air, without air. So all these are the figures we've gotten. The interesting thing is that we are reducing.
Sorry to cut you short, Doctor. I just wanted to let you know you have like 3 more minutes. So
3 more minutes?
Yes.
Okay, no problem. Okay, it's okay. I'll round off. So for incineration, we see that incineration is actually better, from the data, the figures we have here. And this is actually a comparison between the two. So we actually consider incineration, even though people may say the high moisture content. But by the time we bring in, things like trying to tilt the people's attitude, I'm sure we can get waste that actually less in terms of moisture content. So this, I think what will happen is that we're having this for everybody. So I think people will look at, some of this data and so that we don't waste so much time. But one thing that is consistent is that it is viable, it is doable, it is going to help our environment. So these are the financial improvement we can get from all this process. Definitely incineration is actually much better. And these are, some of the work from other states. This is actually an incineration plant, a typical incineration plant. We've actually proposed also that we could do siting of waste energy with decision to water bodies and the topography. Places we can actually domicile the landfill, engineered. And of course, these are some of the issues that actually associated with waste management. We have the economic, we have the financial, we have the technical, we have the social and cultural, and we have many more. It is a whole lot, And the issues associated with waste and climate change, we've enumerated so much. Because of time, I hope people could look at some of these things. What do we do? Of course, waste is a cost in Nigeria. Where do we go? We have to follow what you guys are, waste energy. And government must take the lead. Political will is of essence. I appreciate what Professor said. He talked about energy citizenship. I'm impressed with what he has said. So I know government needs to take the lead, then other ones can actually follow. We need to review the existing policies and make incentive, just like Professor said, is of essence. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much for that. Those were some very scary numbers, I must say. It's we have a long way to go. I personally have a question on clean development management, what you talked about earlier, CDM. but because we slotted the Q&A for your session after the next speaker, I just want to confirm with you if you still have time to wait for the second speaker, for the third speaker to speak, then we ask both of you questions. Is that fine by you,
I am with us. I'm here.
Thank you so much, Doctor. So we'll move ahead to the next speaker, then we'll have the Q&A. Just please have your questions down in the chat box. We'll ask Dr. Okere and the third speaker who is about to speak the questions after she speaks. Our next speaker is, and please forgive me if I botch your name. I would like you to correct me if I'm wrong. Eniye Igbanibo or Eniye Igbanibo. I would like you to correct me if I'm wrong, please.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Ene Igbanibo. You tried.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me, believe me. Thank you so much. I like to pride myself in making an effort. So before you go ahead and speak, let me just read your profile as we had created. So Eniye is the founder and energy policy advisor at Africa Energy Capacity Building Project. This project focuses on building and upskilling indigenous African capacity for global renewable energy transition across all fields, ranging from engineering to tech to law and policies relevant to ensuring Africa engages in energy transition timelessly. She is currently pioneering research in the development of policy and regulatory framework for the deployment of carbon capture and storage projects in sub-Saharan African countries with a history of oil and gas production. Thank you so much for that. Nigeria needs that desperately. The outcome of our research will assist such countries develop a tailored regulatory framework that must be put in place for carbon capture and storage, CCS for short, to be engaged as a carbon emissions reduction measure within these areas and jurisdiction. Thank you so much for joining us, Eniye, and you have the floor. I would like to also mention that Eniye is also, if I'm not mistaken, a lawyer. Yes, you have the floor. Hello? She is also an energy and environmental lawyer, by the way. Thank you so much, Eniye. Thank you for joining us. You have the floor. You're muted, by the way. Hello? Eniye, are you with us? Okay, I think we lost her. Let's give her a moment.
Hi,
Yes.
sorry, I was disconnected for a moment, but I'm back.
That's
on.
fine. So you have the floor.
So first of all, I'm just going to take away all the complexities in my profile that I just read.
So Eniye, I noticed you're on two different devices. What I would advise is the device you are not using to speak, you should put off the sound. Do you understand? No. When I mean put off the sound, I mean like mute your speaker on that device. Do you get my point? Yeah, it's actually muted. It's still it's giving feedback on both sides. That's my concern. It's fine. Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Are we good? Good. Okay, so I'll go on. I'll first of all try to take away all of the complexities in my profile, so it's easy for everyone to get what I'm saying. So basically, carbon capture and storage, we emit a lot of carbon, right? We're having a global crisis from carbon emissions. We're having a global emission crisis, and carbon is a major contributor. So what my research is focused on is how we can capture the carbon that is going into the atmosphere and put it on the ground. Is that straightforward? But there's just a lot of grammar to make it look like it's not straightforward. It is. And quickly about the Africa projects, we're going through energy transition globally, right? We're moving, just as Prof said, we're moving the industry from oil and gas reliance to reliable or renewable energy sources. So the project is to ensure that Africa is up to date. Africa is not left behind. And importantly, Africa's interests and Africa's progress in the transition is represented by Africans. That is basically everything in simple terms. Okay, so I'll go quickly. Now, I conversations. I feel that the simpler it up from where Prof left it off on the fact that we need to reduce what's it called, the importance of reduction of our waste, right? That is a very central part of the entire discussion because we cannot be talking about converting waste to energy if we're still producing waste at our original capacity. So we must first of all reduce our waste output. And I would admit that it's very difficult to do that in Nigeria, even from the individual level. This is because, for instance, if someone finds you reusing a water bottle in Nigeria, it's flagged as poverty. It's not flagged as being mentally friendly. But if you do the same thing in Scotland, you'll be held for it. In fact, in Scotland, specifically Aberdeen, you're hardly going to find disposable cups somewhere. You'll find a water dispenser, but there won't be any cups. Everybody expects you to come with your water bottle, right? So I understand that reducing the reducing the waste out in Nigeria requires a level of sensitization as well. But that is what I believe that your projects can also consider. It's a tiny part, but that mental adjustment will make a lot of difference. But quickly, before I continue, can you tell me how many minutes I have so I know what to mention?
Okay, so you are working within 25 minutes and you just 3 minutes in. So you have 22 minutes to go.
All right, so that is a very interesting part, which I think that there's a need for some sort of sensitization to help people realize that you will use you're just considering the planet. You're just ensuring that you're contributing to a better environment. And another thing is that there are lots of reusable plastics that are used from the most basic restaurants across Nigeria, right? But they're hardly reused. So I'll give you an example. I'll tell you that for each time that I have eaten out, probably, so if I eat out 5 times a week in Nigeria, each of those plates are not reused. They're all trashed. So you can see the different areas in which we're already creating enough waste. So, and that is, I'm starting from the role of members of the public, each and every one of us, before I go on to the role of the government and investors that we cannot deny that we definitely need. So each of us have to play that role to deliberately reduce our outputs. And of course, as we play the role, we communicate it the same way to like members of our household, to our friends and colleagues. We accept that there will be some stigma, but we overlook it and we continue. Now, beyond that is what do we do with the waste that we unavoidably have to generate? Because we can't deny that we have to generate waste. It is that we effectively dispose it. And I must commend you that you spent an entire year putting together your plastic waste. I don't think I have such good records for my own waste management, but that is commendable. Maybe my excuse would be that I live in the UK, and so somehow I manage my waste anyways. But it's very commendable to do that. So what we can do is that we ensure that the waste goes to the right place. That's important. So I'll give an example with the city of Lagos, right? So we come out every morning, we use the pure water bags and the bottled waters and we trash them all on the street. I'm saying we, not because I'm the only culprit, but we, because we're all Nigerians and it's a common problem for all of us. So we litter the entire street, and the people who come to clean up are not aware that we had a global crisis. That's the first problem. And then the people who come to pick up the waste, who clears up from like the Loma bags, the Loma big containers, are also not aware that we have a global waste crisis. So this is how much work your organization has to do. I'm not aware that we have a global crisis. So they're also just taking it off to the next central position to what dispose, as Dr. Okere has pointed out. So you see that there are layers of people that need to get sensitized that, hey, there is an issue here. Hey, this is no longer okay. We can no longer do things the way we do them. It's as good as this information needs to go as far as the bus conductor, because every one of us play a role in all of this. So if we pass the reduction phase and we move on to the proper accumulation to the right, and so it all gets to the right location phase, right? And now we want to talk about electricity generation. The only form of electricity generation, so which is waste to energy or waste to power generation, that will work right now in Nigeria, or that will work quickly, is decentralized power generation. And I'll explain more about it. Professor mentioned a bit of it. I'll explain more about how will it work. It will work in the sense that different communities are generating their own energy from the waste they are accumulating, and they are consuming it within that community. It is only the surplus from what they're generating that is fed into the central grid. You know why this is very important for Nigeria? Our grid system is terrible. We're still using grids that were built decades ago, right? The entire transmission network is terrible. Currently, the amount of energy generated in Nigeria is more than our transmission network can carry. And so the amount of energy that the distributing companies receive, the discos receive, is way less than the amount that the generators produce, because our transmission network is bad, is broken, right? So in as much as we generate a lot of power, a lot in comparison to how much we receive, what we consume is insignificant if we compare it to what is produced. And so any discussion on waste to energy generation or waste to power generation that would go back to that central grid would also not be useful. Just be throwing investments in another area that would not produce results, especially because our transmission network is owned by the government, right? So it is important that we think about decentralization. And this is where investors come in. I recognize that a few communities in the United Kingdom have been able to set up decentralized generating decentralized energy or power plants. So they generate themselves through their community put together effort. They generate themselves, they consume, and they feed the excess to the central grid. That is doable if we find very rich communities. Like now, I will give a lot of Lagos-based example because that is where I have lived, or that is the example I feel like is most central. I haven't lived a lot in Abuja, so I can't give a lot of Abuja examples. But if we give so maybe like bigger communities, like say the VGC community in Lagos State, right? They have their own decentralized generation from all of the waste that they are generating, probably up to the Aja axis or all of the Lekki axis are putting their waste together for a VGC to generate power. They are consuming it within their estates and they're feeding only the surplus into the central grid. That will work. That will eliminate the need for the government, right? So, because we're thinking about what can we do beyond the government, outside the government, especially because we have a government that is not very responsive. So that is a structure I believe would work, right? Again, a lot of stakeholder conversations would go on. A lot of awareness needs to be carried out because people are not aware of these conversations we are having, right? It's, in fact, when I was putting out the notice for the event, I didn't particularly feel the need to like tell people or hammer it their ears to register because they can't. The topic is very far away from the average person, and that is how much work the organization has to do. It's great that you talked about filling this vacuum, doing something about where we are and ensuring that the lag is covered, right? Now, the other thing is that, so that covers it. And also at the areas that would definitely need investors. In the rural areas, if we have rural communities, say an Ajegule community in Lagos, or an Ikotun, or some, all of those other communities in Lagos that would not have people or do not have the financial strength as a VGC to set up their own or finance their own decentralized power source. What will happen is that we will need investors, right? And it takes us back to the government, or maybe it takes us back to the legislative arm of government. We need policies that will favor these investors. I recently attended a webinar on that had to do with renewable energy sources, but we're focusing on solar discussions. And most of the investors within the Nigeria environment are already struggling to cope. And interestingly, unlike in other climes where investors are thinking of investing in solar with the mindset or with the understanding that they can recoup their investment within a shorter period of time, what they actually do is that they have an extended period of time. They need much capital to run this project because the average Nigeria does not have so much spending capacity. And so they have to cap prices, their entry prices into their various solar energy schemes. They have to cap it at a price that is equivalent to the generator that the average Nigeria family has, you know, like the basic generators we have at home. Yeah, so they have to cap their prices that much, right? So an entire structure has to be done around policy, and not just in terms of actual policy alone, but in terms of policy implementation to make these things work. Because, so I'll give you another example. One of the challenges that people who are investing in solar energy in Nigeria are facing is that the government has, in the books, have stated that there's some tax exemptions, so they can import in their equipment and they will be exempted from group of tax, right? But what happens when their equipment or when the things they're shipping in gets to the airports, not to the our various seaports, right? What happens is that they still charge them the tax. So even though in the book, policies have been put in place for them not to be charged this tax, what happens when they practically get there with the goods they're importing into Nigeria? They still get a tax charge. So we have to move beyond just making the policy, but also ensure that the policy is implemented, right? So even drive for investors to come in. It's an entire chain, but we cannot deny the role of the government, right? If we want to achieve this large scale, we need to bring in the government. We can do our part, and that's why I said it from our parts. I've mentioned how much this organization can do. I've mentioned how much each and every one of us can do in our different capacities, right? But importantly, we need the government to come on board with this, on this with us. It is important for the government to come in because we will need financing. We can't deny. So that company you say you volunteer for, imagine that they have some government funding. It will stretch their capacity. They will be able to do much more, right? Assuming they are based in Lagos, to be able to do so much more. And I would keep giving the Lagos example because Lagos is like the New York of Nigeria. So it's like it has the highest population and the highest amount of waste is produced there daily. So they'll be able to do much more than they're currently doing. And so we need the government to come in on this. So there's a need for a lot of stakeholder conversations, for a lot of, I believe that it's important that we don't just have conversations as from academic perspective, but also do a lot of government lobbying, right? Because if we don't lobby about the things that we are passionate about, we are all passionate about the environment, we care about it. But if we don't lobby with the government over these things that we care about, they won't play their role. And so it will just be like, we will spend the next decade complaining. It will be like every other discussion, every other year we'll come together and we'll complain. Every other year we'll come together, I like the things that are going wrong. We talk about the challenges, talk about the way forward, we talk about the solutions, and then our hands are tied again for another 1 year. So I think that it's important that as people who are interested in this subject matter, we go into lobbying, we go into active conversations that will make a lot of difference beyond speaking at events like this, or speaking at academic conferences, or beyond speaking to the next generation. Because there's so much I can say to the next generation about the problems, but they won't be able to do much, right? So somebody has to wake up and say, you know what, we're going to lobby this government into doing this. Another reason why this lobbying is important is that what I have found in my experience is that the international community cannot force the hand of Nigerian government to do things. The Nigerian government will do what they please, right? And so if we cannot compel them to do things, and we cannot bring them to reason on their own, or to realize that this is where the world is and this is the crisis we're facing, then we need to lobby them into doing it. That is my perspective. Everyone else may have a different view, but that is my perspective. That is when the things we do, we spend our time doing academic research, and all of our conversations and our passions begin to make meaning when we see it practically. Another aspect that we cannot ignore, especially because the conversation is Nigeria, is the CO2 emissions, right? The carbon emissions into the atmosphere. Now, sometimes when we talk a lot about waste, we focus a lot on the physical waste that we can see. And we talk about waste to energy, but we focus a lot about the physical waste we can see, and not the waste that is born into the atmosphere. That, in fact, is a major contributor to the greenhouse gas crisis, to the global emission crisis we are facing. So the global warming crisis we're facing, CO2 is a central contributor to that crisis. And Nigeria, in the last 7 years, has been among the top contributors to gas emissions globally. Like, it has stayed among the top countries in the last 7 years for global gas emissions. So what can we do differently if we're talking about waste to energy, waste to power? One of the things that research has shown is that the carbon that we emit, I would explain this slowly because it may be a bit technical, but it's very, very straightforward. The carbon that we emit, right? If it is reinjected into our oil and gas reserve from where we draw oil and gas, right? It improves the quality of oil that we produce. It hates. So, and again, remember that the reason why we are drawing the oil and gas is as much as we sell it up, as much as we sell it up to refine and come back, it's for energy generation. So, and that is a two-way game, because on one hand, we can inject that carbon back into those reserves that we are drawing oil and gas from, and the carbon will remain there even after we've stopped using that reservoir, right? So that's an important part. Whereas at the time where we are still drawing out the oil and gas, that carbon that is going back in will improve the quality of oil and gas that we draw out. And so we cannot ignore the CCS conversation, which is carbon capture and storage conversation. We have to capture the carbon that we are emitting, and store it on the ground in the oil and gas reserves from which we are drawing, or even the ones we've completely used up. This is on another hand is helping us to manage the energy waste in a lot of ways, or manage the waste that we are giving off into the atmosphere. But we cannot even talk about the CCS project without the government. That is crystal clear, because a lot of policies will have to be put in place. I'm not denying that we have a role, but I'm just acknowledging the things that are beyond our paycheck, and for which we need to speak with, probably lobby with those who have the capacity to sign these checks. That for CCS projects, we will need government policies. We will even need policies to be able to attract investors. So it's an entire higher level of conversation altogether. But to wrap this all, I would first of all commend the work you're doing and point out to you that that you have a lot of people to say this, from the conductor to the market woman to your colleagues, to your friends, to your family, to all of us. I don't like to say all of us, I mean like the average Nigerian. To all of us who believe that we're using a bottle, we're using a plastic, all of us, and shape minds. And to everybody else on the call, I would also encourage us that we should try to reduce our waste, reduce how much waste output we create, and see how to ensure that the waste we unavoidably generate is channeled or gets just thrown randomly. All of this would help. We can't deny the role of the investors, tax policies, laws that we have to make, the role of the government, but let us as citizens pick up our role and get it running. And then I trust and that in the long run, the government will catch up, right? And that is where my project actually comes in. Because I understand that the government takes a lot of time, especially African government, take a long time to catch up with reality. I just think that it's best for me to prepare the people who are in the industry. So we are ready. We are already ready and ahead. So when the government unavoidably has to wake up to their responsibility, we're not thinking of getting expatriates. We're not thinking about oil industry where everything had to come from the to wake up. So that is where my project also comes in. Basically, all of it. Everybody should do their part, and one step at a time. It may feel tiring, it may feel overwhelming, especially if you're looking from the place of somebody who is passionate about it. But eventually, in these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With even more than 5 minutes to spare, thank you so much for that. I think I would take note of the fact that you were very particular about how a lot of things we want to practicalize are not possible if we don't have a, effective approach and support from the government. And yes, we understand that. We all understand that. Professor has said it, doctor has said it. We understand the role government has to play. But even while we wait for governments to, step up to their responsibility, we will do the things you have suggested, like sensitization at the granular level, at the grassroots level, sensitizing even the common markets woman to please have a trash bag where she puts all her waste instead of just pouring everything into one, roadside or one gutter. So you're very much right. I also like to mention that this active lobbying thing, see what Greta Thunberg is doing. Just yesterday, she was even announcing week 149 school strike. If I had known that the world would accept me to not go to school, if I was going to, strike for good reasons, I would have striked a long time ago, and I would have just, promoted so much green and, So many good initiatives while I was out of school. She has been out of school for 149 weeks straight, and she still stands for what she believes in. She will tell world leaders, you are destroying our world, you are destroying it for our children, you are destroying it for us. And that is something that you have to be bold about. It takes a lot of guts, especially in a country like Nigeria, where the idea of speaking out as a youth can be very risky, if you get my point. So it's going to take a lot of work from us.
I guess, add that, right? To add to lobbying as Greta does, right? There is also subtle lobbying, which we cannot deny.
Okay.
It is like
what do you have in mind?
So it's like subtle lobbying where whether we like it or not, right? Everyone, so professors and experts. I'm not putting him on the spot. No, I'm not doing that. I'm just giving an example.
Oh,
because
that's fine.
I'll conversation. So there is, as we rise in our various fields, or as we grow more experience and get more reach within our industry, we become the industry gatekeepers. We become those people who are on who the government cannot avoid when the conversation is about this industry, right? So what I have found I may be wrong, but what I have found in my experience is that sometimes we just wait. We wait for when the government wakes up. We wait for when the government wakes up, or we wait for when we keep on having these conversations about it, and we talk about it, and then we get frustrated. Like, the government is not doing anything. But we can lobby the government subtly. We can write papers. It's just like when we have the conversation on politics, and this is a very Nigerian conversation as long as I'm concerned. It's just when we have the conversation on politics, you would find that young people don't run for office. But every other year we come together, we complain through the four tenors, the 4 years of the other person in government. Then the next election, we will not even vote, I will not register, I will not run for office. Do you get? So there are many ways we can come into it. So some of us can be activists like Greta. It would be great. But some of us can be in the background and write papers and engage stakeholders and look for a way to have these conversations beyond the wall offices or beyond the wall of our research papers.
Yeah.
Right. There are many ways we can engage the government. I can't even think of any strategy from the top of my head. We can engage the government even through market women. We can engage the government even through political campaigns and rallies. Like, those are many ways. We can engage them by subtly sending. There are many ways, right? So some of us can be activists, some of us can be subtle, some of us can use our voters card as an opportunity to engage this conversation. And I understand that there are more pressing issues in Nigeria, like hunger, like employment.
Yes.
So it's hard to talk about the environment when people are talking about food, but there is a tipping point, right? So we can negotiate with things like hunger, use hunger as a negotiation card, or an unemployment as a negotiation. We can also bring up the environment. It won't be easy. Nobody is saying it's going to be easy, but it will be more effective than if we wait on the government, because governments, I don't know the next one, but the governments in African countries have a long history of taking their time, which sometimes is better.
Thank you so much for that. And yeah, it's very impressive that, you know, it starts with just believing in it, as you said, because you made a very valid point that Nigeria has a lot of issues. So when you think about environment, you think about the fact that, do you even have your basic needs sorted out? But it starts with each and every one of us using every platform we have, even if it's professional platforms or whatever. Just last week, for example, I run a young law firm, and I had a client on the call last week, and she was of the opinion that I should print out documents and send it to our office, even though I had sent her the original copies in soft copy. And there were no agreements, so they didn't need execution. So I had to convince her on that call that there is no need to waste paper, waste transportation, while I had already sent you the soft copies, which are original copies, to your mail. If you want it so badly, keep those soft copies. I don't see the need for us to have everything in paper forms, because as I told someone earlier today, most of these things end up in a clerical grave in one room, filled with stockpiles of paper. We don't use these things. We don't even make reference to most of them again. So try your best to always reduce. It's that simple. And that way I've sort of evangelized the idea of, you know, not wasting paper. So that's a form of lobbying, in my opinion, too.
Yeah.
But I have to first believe in it. And that's why I tell
Yeah.
my team at our law firm, we don't need to print something that doesn't need to be printed. If it's soft copy, use an electronic signature. Try to reduce waste.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your
Yeah.
time. So let's move ahead to the, okay,
Right.
what, before you speak, please, if you have any questions, please, let's have it in the chat box. I already have 2 questions to note. You can move ahead. You can go ahead and speak.
Oh, just as you lobby with that client, right?
Yeah.
If you look around, you also have access to people who are in the state assembly, people who are in the local council, and that is how we lobby people, right? But what I have observed, I may be wrong, but this is my observation, is that somehow we separate academia from the real world. Somehow we separate being an environmentalist from the real world. So we have all of this high-level environmentalist conversation, and sometimes I'm thinking, how can the average person understand what we're talking about? So it is until we find a synergy, like Greta has done. She has brought it down to the level where the average school child can relate to it.
Yes.
So they're not just holding placards, but they're holding placards that they can explain. So
True.
that's, so again, so when I'm having conversations with local government chairman with a paper that has like 10 words that he doesn't understand, but we're having the conversation in very simple terms that he can him why he shouldn't just throw the bottle away on the road. Of course, it will take a while, but it makes sense. He may not do it himself, but he will tell his friend.
Yeah.
So many things. It's funny. The conversation makes a lot of difference. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. While we wait for any questions, the question was posed to Dr. Okere earlier. Doctor, are you still with us? Hello, Doctor.
I'm here. What's the question, please?
Okay. So someone asked, you said incineration is the most productive or the best approach. But the question is, how do we, I noticed the diagram with an industrial incineration machine and all that, but we're concerned, how do we avoid CO2 gas emissions into the atmosphere when using the procedure of incineration?
Okay, thank you so much. In fact, this morning, we are talking about coronavirus vaccination, and 2 doctors, one in UK, one in US. In fact, the one in US was actually saying people should not take, and we got talking in a particular platform, and I mentioned something like cost-benefit analysis. I told them, I don't think there's anything that is 100% efficient. What matters is when you look at, try to balance and see which one to go by. Of course, there are emissions coming from incineration, no doubt about that. But you must also look at other benefits that we get from it. I'm sure by the time you take all of them together, you can say we should go by incineration. Example, incineration can actually reduce the quantity of waste by as much as 90%. You're actually reducing the need for landfill. You're actually reducing air pollution. You're actually reducing water pollution. You're actually reducing soil pollution. And as well, what incineration does is it's actually removing the possibility of getting methane. And we all know the global warming potential of methane. Methane is about 21 times more than carbon dioxide. So if you look at all this, you can actually say that incineration is actually better. In fact, in one of the papers I sent sometime, one of the reviewers said that I should also add that for something like anaerobic digestion, that we can also get compost from it, which is also beneficial. Okay, I appreciate that. But if you look at all this, it's a cost-benefit thing. So by the time we look at all, and also know that we have modern technology. Modern technology has made it possible that some of these emissions are actually reduced to the barest minimum. An incineration plant of 1960 and now cannot be the same. I don't know, maybe I want to share this. I want to share this 1 minute. This. can you see this?
I can see it. If you can see it,
Okay.
just give us
Okay,
feedback
good.
in the chat box.
Okay, it's a simple thing.
Do you mind? Do you mind projecting? Do you mind opening the slideshow so we can read it?
Oh, you're not seeing it?
We can see it, but it's not really.
Dr. Perry, can I add to what you said in relation to your recommendation of incineration?
Can you do what?
Can I add to what you've said with regards to incineration and so one other thing is that I agree with him that I agree with Dr. Kiri that if scientifically, I'm not a scientist, so if scientifically they think that is the best bet, then it is the best bet. So the question then is, what can we do about the carbon that is being emitted, right? And that's where CCS comes in, carbon capture and storage, right? Carbon capture and storage acknowledges that there are some things that we cannot get rid of. We must emit carbon, whether we like it or yes. That is where we are with carbon. Well, it's the same thing with like the oil and gas industry. Whether we like it or not, we will depend on oil and gas. So the same way we have to capture every other form of carbon, the carbon that is emitted from this activity can also be captured and channeled back underground into our oil and gas reservoirs. And that carbon can be held underground for over 1,000 years. If it stays underground for over 1,000 years, we no longer have a problem with that carbon. So somehow, all of these things, they act together. Like they're not in isolation, right? So they all come together to help us to achieve our goal. The goal to having a healthy planet cannot be achieved by just one measure. We have to bring this here, bring that here, pull all of them together to get our goal. That's all I wanted to contribute.
Yeah. Thank you. You made a very, very, very valid point. And what I was just trying to say that if incineration was that terrible, here on the screen. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Doctor, we're with you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I can hear you.
Yeah. I said what she said, Enuje, right? Enuje, am I correct? I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrongly. So what you said is quite valid. We can't do anything in isolation. It's an integrated process. We need to bring here, and try to find a center. But what I'm saying finally is, if institution, combustion process, as it may be, is that terrible, we're not going to have this figure that we have projecting here. This is massive, and these are the people who are in charge.
Wow.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Doctor. Now, just as you were speaking in here, someone asked the question, what about the negative effects? Yes, you say it can be stored up for 1,000 years, but are you telling us that within 1,000 years, there is no negative effect for the next generation? Because on this issue of green and renewable energy, there's this quote that I like to quote a lot, and I tell people that we do not inherit this word for our forefathers, but we borrow it from our children, from the next generation. So it's kind of a progressive mentality to imagine that we inherit. It's a very old quote by one of those Native Americans. We don't inherit this earth from our fathers, but we borrow it from our children. So how are we sure we're not making it worse for the next generation? And we have to start rounding off this session. Any negative effects?
I'll quickly say that in the early 1950s, I think probably 90s, or around that period when we started depending on oil and gas and burning petroleum, we didn't think that would have this crisis. Coal was so bad, and then we thought that petroleum was the answer. And so we moved to petroleum. Now we have found that petroleum is not the answer. That petroleum is so bad, and now we want to get all of the carbon on the. So we don't have all of the answers. We have, if we're being honest with ourselves, we don't have all. However, the scientific projections say that we can hold carbon underground for 1,000 years in oil and gas reservoirs. We can hold it underground for 1,000 years. And once we achieve that, once we're able to achieve that, right, like every carbon that goes underground will no longer be a problem to us. Now, in order for us to do, that's why I said the government is important. In order for us to do that, policy frameworks have to be in place. The problem is actually not with the capturing of the carbon or the putting it underground. The problem is the carbon staying underground for 1,000 years. right? Because we've never had to put it underground for 1,000 years before. And 1,000 years is so many generations, right? So there's an entire liability framework in each. So for like there's an entire legal framework for liabilities, for who will take responsibility. If anything goes wrong, there's an entire monitoring system where they put different devices inside the reservoirs that monitor the movement of the carbon underground. So once anything goes wrong, there should be a response to take care of it. And if we're being honest, we're just trying to find a way to ensure that the generations after us find the earth to even inherit, right? We're trying to make up for all of the harm we've done. So we're not sure of the answers. We don't know with certainty what the answers are, but this is the closest we've gotten. We have to move this carbon underground. If we move it underground, we will be all right. And to ensure that it stays underground for 1,000 years, we're going to do what? We're going to have a liability regime in place. We're going to have monitoring devices put underground. We're going to do all of this. So that is the best we can do. But to leave the carbon out there is not going to work. And if, as Dr. Okere has said, they recommend that incineration is the best measure, then that is the best measure we can adapt. That is, but I mean, I am very practical in my perspective. So it may come across as I'm not trying to, but I'm just being practical. Practically, what can we do? What can we say? What can we lose?
Thank you very much for that. Thank you so much for that. That's very important. We have to just keep, finding the balance while we figure out newer ways to make things work. While we move on to the last speaker for this session, I'd just like to take note that we should please follow Age on all channels, all social media channels, on Twitter, Alliance for Green Environment, on Instagram, Alliance for Green Environment, and on, I think, Facebook. Oh, sorry, LinkedIn, Alliance for Green Environment. Our last speaker for today, and quite an inspiration, young lawyer with a promising career and now doing great things on a global scale, Caleb Adebayo. I would like to just take a moment and read Caleb Adebayo's profile. Caleb is an international lawyer, experienced in environmental and energy, currently undergoing his LLM in environmental and energy law at the New York University. He currently works as a legal advisor to the permanent missions of the Maldives to the United Nations. He's also the founder and team lead of Earth Plus Sustainability Network, an environmental non-profit organization delivering sustainable environmental solutions across Africa. He has worked on US energy and environmental issues as a legal intern at the State Energy and Environmental Impact Center in New York, and a research assistant with Guorini Center for Environmental, Energy, and Land Use Law, New York. In Nigeria, he worked on the energy and projects team at Templars, a top-tier law firm where he advised clients on several top energy deals with environmental considerations. He's a fellow of the Barack Obama Young African Leaders Initiative, YALI for short, and is a member of the Regional Leadership Center, RLC Fellowship. Also a member of the US Carrington Youth Fellowship, CYFI, and a climate tracker. He is an alumnus of Obafemi Awolowo University and the Nigerian Law School Lagos branch, Lagos campus. Please join me in welcoming to this conference and global and virtual stage, Caleb Adebayo. Hi, Caleb. Thank you so much for your patience and your time. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Joshua. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you. Okay, so I'll just jump right into it. I know that our time is far spent. So I'm supposed to be speaking on advancing waste-to-energy policies and implementation in Nigeria, a reality or a myth. And I'll just dive right into it. I mean, thank you so much for what you're doing, putting this together, the launch of the organization, and also what all the other speakers have said. Really, really insightful stuff. Thank you very much, Professor Olawi USEN. I followed your work for as long as I can remember. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Enia. I'm very familiar with what you guys do, and I must say it's great work. So diving in immediately, I'll start with, so I'll talk about this topic in about 4 parts. First, I'll give slight facts. Facts that many of you are already familiar with, but I'll try not to reiterate what other speakers have said. Then I'll talk about the problems that exist from a legal perspective. And then I'll talk about the real question of reality or myth. And I'll probably just, tie everything together with a conclusion. So starting with the facts, what are the facts that we have that for waste to energy? First, Nigeria generates about 32 million tons of municipal solid waste, the common waste that is used for waste to energy per annum. And this can produce about 4.4 terawatts per hour of electricity annually. And that's a lot for a country that generates somewhere between 2,500 to 4,500 really megawatts on a good day. Now in 2015 alone, waste to energy plants across the US, now focusing on the US, burned a total of 29 million tons of municipal solid waste and generated 14 billion kilowatt hours of electricity in the process. Now compare that to Nigeria, which I just said has and generates about 32 million tons every year. And imagine how much we could be producing in electricity if this is harnessed. Technically, a number of scientists and lead economists have said that WTE, I'll just shorten it, waste to energy, is technically more reliable than solar, hydro, and wind, because you always have waste, but you do not always have the sun, the wind, or sometimes you could really have scarcity of water, like what is happening with the Lake Chad, which could certainly have been a very good source of hydropower. So there's that. And it's also capable of providing waste management solutions and electricity supply solutions in one pod, especially in densely populated areas that generate large amounts of garbage. Now, when I mention densely populated areas, you probably think of a city we're all familiar with, Lagos. Lagos, Ibadan, perhaps Enugu, Abuja. These are cities that can really transform the WTE index. Now, Lagos alone generates more than 15,000 tons of waste per day. That is a lot to solve these issues. So the question is, why do we have the problems? At first, like I said, I'll take it from a legal perspective. Is there a legal framework for waste to energy in Nigeria? Now, Nigeria has one document that seemingly attempts to address this waste to energy framework. It's the Biofuel Policy and Incentives of 2007. Now, the policy is, of course, old, 2007 policy, pretty ambitious, but the ambitions are ambitions that we have passed the goals, the timeline for the goals, and we have not achieved them. For instance, the aim was to achieve 100% domestic production of biofuels by 2020, and that has not happened. So when I say biofuels, I'm talking biogas, and biogas is typically from waste and other materials, sometimes agricultural waste, sometimes municipal solid waste, sometimes a mix of all of them. And having this goal to produce 100% domestic production by 2020, we're in 2021, and it has completely failed to achieve even close to that. Now, another problem with that framework, like I said, I would not say there's a legal framework for waste to energy in Nigeria. I'd say that this is an attempt, or this was an attempt in 2007, because if you read the policy, it doesn't touch on the key issues that should be touched on in the WTE framework, particularly on infrastructure. Now, one of the problems also with that document is that the NNPC is the institution there that is in charge of the governance framework. So it seems a bit counterintuitive to have the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, Petroleum, as the institution to govern an alternative fuel as biofuel. Because of course, biogas, if produced, can perform the same functions, or most of the time, the same functions as natural gas. Now, if NNPC is pushing natural gas and in fact oil, it will not see there will be no incentive to push the alternative at the same time. So that's one of the problems, having NNPC at the helm of pushing this. Of course, I've also mentioned that it failed to achieve its 100% domestic production goal. And the proposed governance framework is federally centered. So things are supposed to be run from the federal government level. Meanwhile, when you're talking MSW, municipal solid waste, you're talking state, local government activities. So in the document, it proposed the Biofuels Energy Commission, which is meant to be a federal commission. So how you balance that with the state government in charge of waste management, the local government in charge of waste management becomes a problem, because how do you feed it from there and through a federal commission that will govern it, and then feed it back to where it's meant to be supplying to. And I remember, and he also mentioned the issue of decentralized systems, which is a lot of what is happening now. So that defeats the purpose, essentially. So now let's move to reality or myth. So I've just talked about the legal framework, try to examine if there is indeed a framework. And I mean, it's pretty much as though there is no framework, because there is no specific WTE policy. The biofuel policy, while seemingly addressing it, does not properly address it. And of course, it has failed to achieve many of its goals and has these problems that I have highlighted. Now, reality or myth. The truth is, whether WTE Nigeria becomes a reality or a myth, or remains a myth, is dependent largely on what happens, what we do as a country. The question as to whether it can work, the answer to that question would remain a yes, because it's working in other places. Somewhere in Koshe landfill in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, there is a 50 megawatt WTE project operating, and has been operating since 2018. I think that South Africa also has one, probably started about 2-3 years ago. So we have these things operating not just in Scandinavian countries, but also in Africa. They're working, and they can work in Nigeria. We have all the metrics to make them work. In fact, in 2013, a project was started somewhere in Ikosi Pilot Biogas Project. It was run by the Lagos State government and a company called Midori. That project ran for a few months and stopped functioning. It does not function till date. Now, there are critical problems that have to be addressed that resulted in a project that was meant to, the project in fact generated power for the first few months and made everybody around there really happy about what was happening. And it was helpful because there was a market just beside it. So they were feeding their biodegradable waste into that system, and it was supposed to work. But then we had it, like many things in the country, fail. So let's talk about the roadmap to reality, right? It can happen, but what's the roadmap we need? I think the first thing is a national policy on WTE. Now, a national policy on WTE would involve bringing together all the stakeholders in the system, private sector, civil society, government, and designing something that works and that can really address the life cycle of WTE. All types of sources, the infrastructure, the financing, the deployment of these solutions, the routes to market, everything that essentially ensures that it works. And it would also help for access in finance, because again, WTE projects are pretty cost intensive. So if you're looking to raise financing from offshore financiers, it would be good to know that, there's a policy existing, there are sets of rules existing that show government support for these kind of projects, that show that the government will lend these kind of things or lend tax breaks or anything to support this project. That's the first thing. I think a second thing is to start introducing high landfill fees. It's easy to dump waste in landfills. Many developed countries are beginning to have the challenge of fewer landfills because there's not enough space. And so there are countries that constantly export their waste to other countries because there's no space for that. But we seem to have a lot of that space here. And so you see landfills developing pretty much everywhere. I believe that a proper waste management system with high landfill fees to say that, okay, there should be, again, I heard a number of speakers talk about sort of the structures around the reduce, the reuse, the recycle, the recover. right? And I feel like this is something that should be integrated into general systems of such that people are mandated to separate wastes. People are mandated to, in certain ways. People are mandated to push certain wastes to certain that can be recycled. This is where it goes. Recycle, this is where it goes. So rather than having WTE plants where these wastes that are biodegradable are being pushed to immediately. With high landfill fees, it discourages people from just, you know, setting up landfills and just throwing anything there. It's also important that research and development is funded, R&D, because I mean, I hear a couple of the speakers saying they're doing research on the issue, and that's great, right? We need more research being funded for this because we need to understand more about how this will work in the Nigerian context. So more research is key. We also need integration of WTE from, or rather the separation of WTE from the DPR, the NMPC, and other petroleum agencies. So the DPR, the NMPC should not be the policies that mandate certain percentage of renewable energy used by businesses. So if we have that, then we see, I mean, we have something that Nigeria's renewable energy policy, the RAMP, but we do not have something that mandates businesses to say, okay, these are the kind, this is a certain percentage of your business, this is a certain percentage of your business energy supply. 30%, 20% should come from renewable energy. And this is the renewable energy mix. Maybe not mandating the mix for them, but we know that in that mix being supplied, there's work being done from the WTE side. So it would increase use of renewable energy such that we know that, okay, there is a market for WTE produced energy, which is very important in the work that is being done. A market is very important. Then also including it in pioneer industries list. WTE industry should be on the pioneer, should have pioneer status such that they have tax breaks that enable them to do, you know, very good work without thinking about tax. And then also removal of import tariffs on knockdown parts for WTE infrastructure. If these tariffs, customs duties are removed or at least reduced significantly, then we can have all of these parts being imported and set up here, and then we have the infrastructure being set up at very low cost. Also, something very interesting. Recently, the IMF did
Caleb, can you hear us?
8 carbon reduction projects, which WTE projects fall, you know, within that.
So just so I confirm, I'm not sure if it was by network or it was generally something we noticed. You said recently, and I lost you. I don't know if it was to everyone or just myself.
Oh, okay.
So when you said recently, that's when I lost you. I'm not sure if it applies to everyone.
Okay, so I'll just go over. It was last week. The IMF proposed setting a carbon price floor for carbon emissions. And I was saying that this, while this might take a while to see realization in emerging economies like Nigeria, it is something that could aid carbon reduction projects like WTE projects. And also, I believe that there should be, like I think I had said this before, revisiting of waste disposal methods and mandatory sorting and separation. Then data, you know, two important things I'll mention. Data, we need data on MSW, that's municipal solid waste. We do not have sufficient data in Nigeria. Even the data for the Lagos waste, the waste being produced in Lagos, 15,000 tons, you know, you see different numbers at different places, something 10, something 15, and Lagos seems to have a number of things together. Now think about the other states that we don't really know what is generated, when it is generated, who is generating it, and all of those issues. So I think availability of data is something that we should start working on, and then cooperation among states. Now, Lagos seems to be doing, fairly commendable job in that area. We need other states. We need Ibadan to rise, or your state to rise up to the challenge. We need Enugu to rise up to the challenge. We need the FCT to rise up to the challenge. We need other states. We need Kano to rise up to the challenge. So this can happen if there's cooperation and data among states. Now, states need to start getting responsible about MSW pathways. There needs to be a focus on how do we manage waste. In fact, that's where the question should start. How do we manage waste responsibly and sustainably? Then we can start thinking of how do we push some of these waste. I mean, the one that can recycling and the one that cannot to WTE. And also with the rise of ESG and increasing climate commitments, I believe that is also something that would spur the growth of WTE, and that WTE can take WTE projects can take advantage of the rise in ESG concerns, because of course any WTE business would fall in the sweet spot of ESG automatically. And then I think finally on that point, multi-stakeholder coordination is required. What do I mean? This cannot be done by one sector of society. Private sector cannot run this alone. We need government policies to support WTE. Right, and the government cannot do it alone, of course, as we have seen in the past. We need a lot of private sector activity, private sector sorting of donor financing, of low interest loans. We need civil society as well to educate people, because people do not know, right? And it's making the job difficult. It's easier to do WTE when you have your waste sorted. You have the waste that you need biodegradable in one place. It's hard if you have to sort.
Sorry to cut you short. We have about 5 minutes to go.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm going a bit.
Thank you.
And then I'll just quickly, move to a couple of challenges that I think face these reality pathway that I have suggested. Funding infrastructure. Like I said, it's expensive, right? Political will, doing business issues, and of course, the financial currency mismatch, forex concerns, currency devaluation, rising interest rates. Now, how can these be addressed? With funding infrastructure, funding can be sourced from the international market, because there seems to be funding available for RE work. Recently, the World Bank launched about $600 and something million financing for RE work in West Africa. The IFC also has launched some financing recently for Sub-Saharan Africa. We have all of these financing mechanisms coming forward. The G7 at their last meeting, promised some 100 billion push out of financing for Africa. I mean, yeah, it might be a bit far-fetched, seeing as they have not delivered on prior commitments so much. But then we're seeing institutions like the IFC and the World Bank repeatedly financing projects like this in Africa. So getting the policy part right, getting the proposal right, getting stakeholders together can make us access funding for such infrastructure. Political will, that has to be built by civil society, private sector putting pressure on the government, letting them see how this works. I recall NEA talking about bringing the academia, and not just isolating the academia, but bringing them and making them relevant to policy making. I think there has always been a mismatch, and making that happen would really help with the political will part of things. Doing business issues have to be fixed. Doing business issues, include the whole currency mismatch issues, because I mean, if you're taking finance nationally and you do not, and the the currency devaluation is constantly happening, there's that mismatch, the repatriation financing for forex is happening. The investors do not want to have those issues. So these are things that need to be fixed. And I'll just say as a final thing that I recall, I think this was Ania that said that there, how do we focus on environmental issues when we have other pressing issues, particularly in Africa and Nigeria? This is what I would say, and this is what I've continued to propose over time to this question. There is a need to start integrating environmental goals in non-environmental goals, right? So they really cannot be separated. So when we begin to find the connection, that point where they meet to say, yes, I'm talking about WTE, which has environmental impacts, but at the same time, it's an energy issue, and energy will help you and I mean, there's research to this effect. Energy, having more energy, right? Being energy rich, rising from energy poverty would actually help you rise from poverty in other areas. You have more hours of daylight. I mean, daylight in the sense that you have light, so you can be more productive, right? You can, you can buy a laptop and use for business. You can access the internet. You have your phone to make calls to do your business. Yeah, really, there's so much that having power supply can do for you in terms of raising people out of poverty, in terms of empowering people economically, in terms of other metrics that are not necessarily environmental metrics. So at the point where we begin to look at, that are non-environmental and integrate into the environmental goals, then we begin to find an easier pathway to convince decision makers that there is a need for this happen. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Caleb. Thank you so much. It's really impressive how you addressed the fact that there is a need for alternative agencies. I mean, it's quite it's funny. It's funny to know that NMPC is in charge of most of these ideas, as you have said. It can't find fulfillment, as you said. So alternative agencies need to be created for alternative energy, renewable energy solutions. I think that's one of the most important things I took from your session. I think also important is ESG that you mentioned, environmental, social, corporate governance. I noticed that no one else had mentioned earlier about, kind of making sure the corporate space, I mean, using Lagos for an example, imagine if businesses in Lagos were tested for ESGs before they got investments and funding and things like that. Imagine if questions like, what are your CSRs? Are they impacting society? If those are the kind of criteria that it takes to get investment, you see some of these companies sitting well and making an effort to make impact in society. I even wanted to mention earlier with Enie that what exactly do you guys feel about green bonds? I know the first one was in 2017 or so, but it doesn't seem to have taken much traction, the idea of green bonds in Nigeria. I mean, what do you think about it, Caleb? Let's start off the Q&A. Caleb, Enie, what do you guys feel about green bonds and its practicality in Nigeria for funding some of these kind of initiatives?
I mean, green bonds are great and they're happening already in Nigeria, right? They're a great way for these kind of projects. I'd say the Nigerian private sector market has to diversify its desire to access capital, because green bonds cannot be the only way to, I mean, you can't rely solely on green bonds. We have to start looking into various other ways of accessing capital. International financial institutions are there. Well, Nigerian commercial banks sometimes, but a number of them have developed portfolio for RE, frankly. Sometimes interest rates are an issue, but then sometimes also IFIs pass financing through them. So that's another way to access this financing. But I'll say green bonds are great. I mean, the fact that they are happening in Nigeria is a good one. It's a big deal. And at least green businesses can say, oh, we put together the right documents and put together the adequate criteria, we can access this financing to push this project. So yeah, that's definitely a great way to raise financing.
Thank you so much for that note, Caleb. What about you, Nie? What do you think about the idea of green bonds?
Well, I agree with Caleb that they are great, right? My only concern is that, again, it operates within a particular market, yeah? And so if I'm going to invest in this market, I'm not just thinking about green bonds. I'm thinking about the entire market setting. Is this market a great market for me? Personally, I do not think that I would want to invest in the Nigerian market except I live in Nigeria. And I don't live in Nigeria currently, right? So there's the factor that as much as we want to make progress, the entire concept of green bonds are operating within the markets that the people don't trust. Like, you can get as common as Nigerians saying you don't even trust your foreign currency that's sitting in a Nigerian account. You don't trust that. You don't know what the government will do next. And so that is my only concern with green bonds operating within Nigeria. Other than that, it's a very great step.
Thank you so much for your input on that. I think one of the questions a lot of people have asked in the chat box and keep asking, and it's really put to any of our speakers. Okay, someone just asked what are green bonds. Green bonds are just bonds or funds that are put together. They are financial instruments that are put together to fund, environmental or climate benefits. So it's a fund put together. People invest in such funds to enable this kind of initiatives that we're talking about. So it started in, I think, 2017, December or so, the first green bond in Nigeria. Some banks like Access Bank and Sterling Bank have shown interest in also enabling green bonds, but it's not really taking traction. So I wanted to get their opinion on that. About the question I was going to ask before someone asks what a green bond is. A lot of people keep asking this question, and I think every speaker has played around it. How can we move from a oil and not even oil and gas, oil dependent economy and energy dependence as oil to a sector or to an alternative energy economy as Nigeria? What are the practical steps? Individuals, we have agreed that we need to get talking, get government involved. As individuals, what are the little steps we can take to kind of rely less on oil? Is there a possibility I can produce my own biodiesel? What do you suggest? Any practical suggestions? Because a lot of things are theoretical in this country. When it comes to practice, there's a different topic entirely. So how can we gradually leave this dependence on oil to alternative energy as Nigerians? How can we play roles apart from lobbying and getting government involved and pushing for government to play their role? Who would like to go first?
I'm okay to go first.
Okay.
I'll say that a good step that Nigerians can take towards renewable energy at individual levels is solar energy. And although I acknowledge that solar energy is going to come up with its entire waste crisis, which is predicted to roll in the future if we do nothing about solar waste. Mm-hmm. Now, so someone does not actually know what is solar waste. Solar, when we use solar panels have a lifespan of, I think, 20 years, 25 to 30 years, after which you can no longer use that panel because it is dead, right? So that is going to be solar waste, right? And that all waste also has to be taken care of. Otherwise, we'd have a new waste crisis from solar energy. However, the easy way or the quick way that Nigerians as individuals can adopt to reduce at least on your own level, you're thinking I'm reducing my carbon footprint, is to turn to solar energy. It's going to make a lot of difference. We're hoping that within the next, before we go around to the next 20 years period, we'll be able to figure out how, although other countries have already figured out, we'll be able to figure out how we will tackle our solar waste crisis. That is one way that will work. But then in terms of, in relation to diversifying the economy so that we move from being completely dependent on oil and gas, I do not think that, I may be wrong, but this is my perspective. I do not think that we can force the government to move from depending on oil and gas. We cannot literally force the government to do that, because in the midst of crashing oil prices across the globe, the government still insists that and are expressing optimism that the price will pick up again. So it's hard to convince the government to move. However, what can we do as individuals to help our economy? I think that if we float many more businesses, if more Nigerians switch from the mindset of I need to get a paid employment to what can I do to earn more money, right? It's going to pull in more money into the economy. So other than the fact that we found an alternative route, which is everybody leaving the country, right, in masses, doing remittance to the economy, because I feel like remittance, foreign remittance is the other means by which the Nigerian economy is being funded, right? Mm-hmm. Other than that, the other way we can pull money in is to start up businesses, because I don't know what else we can do. There are no jobs. The government is not moving from where it is. Yeah. So if we start many more businesses that align with the international community or towards where the world is moving generally, that would be a great way to support the Nigerian economy.
Thank you so much for that, Nia. Before other people address the question I had just proposed, someone asked you a question. So the cost of CCS, is it affordable, or the person thinks that one of the reasons why people might not, or companies might not go with CCS is because of the high cost? So how affordable, or how I mean, can the average business or organization in Nigeria afford CCS?
So CCS is for the big boys, if we're being honest. It's not for everybody. However, what works is that, now I don't want to create further complexity, but there is this thing called CDM. If you remember from Dr. Curry's talk, there's this thing called CDM. Now, under the CDM mechanism, right, what happens is that you can carry out a project in a country. So say a BP, a British Petroleum, can carry out a project in Nigeria that will reduce carbon emissions, right? And then come and get they will now count that as in the favor of BP somewhere else in the world, right? Now, CCS qualifies under that CDM mechanism. Am I talking gibberish? I think not.
CDM meaning clean development management, right?
Mechanism, clean development mechanism.
Sorry, 16 clean development mechanism. Thank you for that correction. Yes.
Created under the international community where for companies to benefit, you can go to another country, right? You can go to another country, right, and carry out a CCS project. Because a CCS project reduces carbon in that country, right? And then you now get carbon credits for that work you've done. So that is a viable means by which Nigeria can actually have like its first major CCS project, right?
Yeah.
To reduce the complexity further, companies who are engaged in CCS, they get carbon credit in return. Now, let me explain what carbon credit is. This is getting complicated for.
It's important. It's important to know we'll soon have to round off. So this will be the last. This will be the last statement.
This is the last dip I'm going. Now, carbon credits. Yeah. So companies have an obligation to reduce their carbon footprint, right? So when you do something that reduces your carbon footprint, you get carbon credits. You get a benefit for reducing carbon footprint. So CCS projects gives them companies carbon credit. So that is why big companies are investing in it. Because if we do this, we've gotten carbon credit, which is in our good books. We've done what the government wants us to do. So it's kind of complicated, but it's doable. It's capital intensive, but it is doable. And eventually everybody will be forced to do it at the end of the day in the long run. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Inie. At this point, we would have to, round off for today. And I would like to call on one of the members of the Alliance for Green Environment, Ifunanya Unaude. Unaude, is that pronounced properly? She would be giving the vote of thanks. Ifunanya, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
And did I get your name properly? Please let me get a thumbs up if that's the case.
Okay, it's Unaude.
Unaude. Thank you so much. So much for the attempts. Yeah. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you very much. So I just want to use this opportunity to thank everyone who is part of this program. I mean, this inauguration would not have been a success if you were not here. So this is me saying a big thank you to everyone who showed up for this. And I also want to do a big shout out to our sponsors who helped us to make this innovation a success. So thank you to Allen and Brooks, Addictus team, the Rainbow Media, Marv Studio, GFH News, then the Institute of Oil and Gas, Energy, Environment, and Sustainable Development, Africa Capacity Project, and also Afro Babalola University. I mean, this program would not have been the way it is, not that you put in hands to make this a success. So thank you. And I also want to say, I mean, with what our speakers have said, next time when you see someone with a water bottle and then they're taking their water, you don't need to say, "Sapa nice one." Know that they are being environmentally friendly and you should also do that. And then, I mean, if there is nothing else we've taken from here, just like Caleb has said, said that rising from energy poverty helps us to rise from every other form of poverty. So that is something you should keep in mind whenever you feel like you're the only one doing something as regards this environmental cleanliness and all. Okay, I also want to use this opportunity to call for members. So for everyone that has registered, a form will be sent to your various emails where you could register if you want to volunteer for age. And also do not forget to join us, to follow us on any of our social media handles. We're on LinkedIn, we are on Instagram and on Twitter. I mean, whenever Twitter comes back, join us there too. Okay, so over to our host, Joshua. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Ifunanya. I believe we all have had a very insightful session. Believe me, and this is in all modesty, at some point or the other, I had to take notes, write some things down, quickly step out, check Google and be like, oh boy, hope I'm still following. So it's understandable if not everything here you are able to flow and understand. The most important thing is the interest in, you know, being a part of something bigger than yourself, caring about the society and the environment you live in. So everything you took from today, what you don't understand, do research on, see the ones that apply to you, the ones you can make use of, and make sure you're making an impact in any little way. There is no impact that is too little. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your night, and thanks for coming out.